I'm just going to record, and hopefully this works out. Okay, cool. Wait, so intro. Fun. All right, so this is what we're working on. You guys already know this. And for all the YouTubers, eventually, there's the class, kind of. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
We didn't have consent for.
No, we don't. This is an unlisted channel for sure. Okay, so this is Solidworks class. We're using calipers to measure stuff and build it. And today, you guys are all working on your French presses. It's a workday. I can do some demo stuff up here just from scratch, or I kind of want to just walk around the room and see where you guys are at, and if there's like a particular problem or feature that you guys are kind of struggling with as a group, maybe I can take one of your models up here and work on it up here so that you guys can see it later in the video, or work like here all at the same time. So I'm gonna, I know, so off the top of your heads, like what is the most challenging thing? Where you guys want to just open your models up really quick, walk them around. Maybe we can even like walk around as a group really quick and see how far everyone is. Or I'll just come around table by table. So get your models out, kind of show me where your build's at right now, and we'll find a way to pick what the next step is I'm going to demo on the screen. Wow. Got glass.
Yeah, it actually, I still do it.
Okay. Okay, that's cool. So you got glass kind of there. Cool. Surfaces, is it clicking? Or is it just the surface? That's okay, we'll go back to that. So surface, still need to be clicking, you're done. Super, super great. Oh, it is sticking. Cool. You got the revolve, but you haven't done the spout just yet too. Okay. Working on that spout. You're far enough. You stop. It's like it's still the glass. He doesn't need the metal frame.
How long did this I try? Maybe 2 hours.
Okay. Build it in this part. Where I don't think I'm gonna get into like building parts. So you can build it as like a separate body. And like they're probably these aren't curved, right? Bodies here. I would say keep all of your solid bodies. If it's not literally part
Appearance.
if it is a single part here, so I this you have like 1, 2, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts or so. I always tweak those sketches.
I thought it's not even on the ground.
We're working on about 36 foot tall.
And then I make a leg, and then I take it.
It seems like there are a lot of people still at that point. You're a little bit. So I'm gonna hang on to this one for a couple minutes and take some measurements. I guess I sort of misplaced that file that I demoed last time, or maybe it just I never saved it. So I'm gonna start again from scratch. And this time it's going to be recorded anyway, which is kind of good. It looks like most of you guys are still kind of working on the glass part, this guy. And in the last demo, we built this as a surface, a couple surfaces that we used to make a mutual trim to build this spout. We thickened everything to get this glass part. So I'll try and get through that in the first part of today. And then I'll also go into building this part. I saw a couple of, I guess, those of you who are finished with the glass have already moved on to building the legs and are kind of stuck at that circular pattern feature. So I'll show you how that might work as well. And I guess we'll just take it step by step. So feel free to kind of click along if you want. This stuff is all going to be hopefully saved somewhere online where you guys can get at it later. So I'm going to open up Solidworks. And actually, I'm going to see if it's in my like recent documents. Do I have it? No, just never saved it. Okay, cool. So I'll try and get through this first part kind of quick, up to where we do the trim for the spout, because I know a lot of you guys are kind of waiting right at that point. So I'm going to start this as a revolved feature, just like a simple revolved cylinder shape. And I'm going to start out by building the center line, then I'm going to revolve everything around. And then I'm going to kind of block out the shape of my cylinder without adding dimensions just yet, because I can go back and add dimensions. I'm also going to make a center line connecting these two top things, just so that if I dimension the height of this center line, it'll change the height of the outside of my glass piece. All right, so dimensions. I kind of did this last time. My calipers are not quite big enough, so I'm gonna.
You just want the dimension.
Do you have it?
I mean, all of us.
All right, does anyone know the dimension of the height of this glass piece? Or can you find it really quick? 175? Okay, actually that sounds about right. All right, so I'm going to dimension here, 175 millimeters. Hopefully you guys are all working in metric this time. If not, we can try and switch that over. Does anyone know the outside diameter of my beaker? I guess I can measure it here too. It's like about... Oh, yeah, I'll show you that in a second. Looks like it's about 96. Okay, so when you make a dimension, if you have a center line, like I do, built into this sketch, I'm going to just get out of my dimension tool really quick. So I'm going to pick one line and dimension the distance between the center line and like the outside of my cylinder here. And instead of placing my dimension in between those two, I can move it to the outside. And it will sort of automatically predict that what I'm trying to do is dimension across the center line. And that's about 96 millimeters. Okay. One thing I notice in this sketch is all of my lines are black as opposed to blue, which means everything should be dimensioned, everything should be sort of fixed in space. And that's good. That means if I change something later, things aren't going to just move randomly. Okay, I'm going to get out of this sketch and start by making a feature. So there's a surfaces tab up at the top. If for some reason the Surfaces tab isn't there, you can right click on any of these tabs and say, show me a new tab or hide a tab. Just make sure your Surfaces tab, if it's turned off, you turn it on, because that's where we're going to go. I'm going to make a revolved surface using my sketch, and it wants me to pick a sketch. Hold on a second. Let me get out of here. I'm going to start by picking my sketch. Say, make a revolved surface feature with it. And then it wants to know the axis of revolution. That's my center line. And I know this is review for you guys. Most of you have this part already done. Yep, spin all the way around, 360 degrees around. Okay, cool. And there's my surface. All right, so now on the bottom of my surface, there is a rounded edge or fillet. I can measure that fillet. And let me see if I can show you how I measure this fillet. Okay, this is weird. This is actually very similar. There was an engineer at the company I used to work who was remote, so we did this all the time, this like video chatting kind of stuff. So I'm going to use the depth gauge and kind of approximate where the top of my glass is and where that fillet rounded edge ends. And it looks like it's almost 12. Wow, that's really hard to see. Cool. I usually round to the nearest millimeter. In this kind of modeling, we're just trying to do an appearance model. So I'm going to, still in the Surfaces tab, pick fillet, and pick this edge that I want to fillet. If you haven't already picked the fillet type, there are a couple different types of fillet. I just want to do a nice constant size fillet. And I'm going to type in over here 12 millimeters and hit OK. Boom. Okay. So that's the next step. The next thing I need to make is the spout. And I was thinking about how to make the spout last time, and I thought I might be able to do it by creating a couple different surfaces and intersecting them together, using them to trim one another and combine everything once I'm done. So the first surface I'm going to make is sort of the front view of my spout. And again, I guess I can kind of try and show this here. From the front view, that kind of looks like a triangle, right? That dips down. It's rounded on the bottom. I can build that into the sketch. I might leave it out for now, so I can build it as a fillet. So that's what I'm going to start building. All right, so I'm going to say, when I look at the front of this object, it's like the spout will be facing me. So I'm going to sketch on the front plane and use my favorite little button here to make sure my front plane is facing me. And I'm going to make a sketch of a triangle. And I'm going to sort of be way off here so I can show you how I'm going to constrain these things. The first thing I want to do is make a center line from my origin point. My origin point, that red crosshairs in the bottom, is sort of the center of my model. I'm going to go straight up with that line and then shift to select both of these points and say merge them or make them coincident. That way I know the bottom of my spout is always going to be in the middle of my object. You guys with me so far?
What's like the quick way to like go of like?
If just hit escape. Yeah. If you're stuck in a tool and you need to get out of a tool, escape is your best friend. Okay, I'll show you guys again. So I'm going to undo those few things. So once I have like a rough triangle and it's just loose, and I have an idea of where I want the bottom of my triangle to be, I can pick the top point of that center line, hold shift, pick the point, like the bottom point of my triangle, and it should pick them both, right? Over on the left side, you'll see a menu pop up with a couple of relations that you can add, things that you can do to constrain your geometry, and merge is the one that I want. Sometimes coincident and merge often mean the same thing. You're just telling those points to touch. All right, once I have that, I'm going to take the top point of my triangle here, which will be the surface I'm using to trim my spout. and make it coincident with the top of my beaker, the top of my glass. I'm going to do that for both of these points. So I'm just shift clicking like the edge, the top edge of the beaker and the point. I'm saying coincident. So now if I try to move these around, they stay constrained to the top edge here. That's important because when we go to make a surface with this and then trim with that surface, we need to make sure that our surfaces are lining up and touching one another. Question? That's great too, yeah. There are a lot of ways that we can get to this sort of geometry. Eunice just brought up a mirror entities function that we can use. That would work great. It's also a great tool when we build a bunch of geometry on one side of a center line, and we need to move all of that geometry to the other side of the center line. This is simple enough that I'm just building it kind of from scratch. But I will make these symmetric. So in order to make sure that these triangle arms, like the sides of my spout, always stay symmetric across my center line, I can pick a line, pick my center line, pick the other line that I want to be symmetric, and one of the magical relations that pops up is called symmetric. And now, when I move one side of my triangle, it'll move both sides. That's important because the next thing I'm going to do is say how wide I want this spout to be. So I'm going to measure the top of my spout here. And it looks like it's about 38 millimeters. I'm measuring from the middle of the radius. So I'm building this with sharp surfaces with the idea in my head that after I intersect everything, I'm going to add fillets to make it smooth. So as I measure these things, I'm sort of measuring from the middle of the curved edge. So that once I add a curved edge, it'll sort of even out. All right, so 38 millimeters, that. And the last thing I probably need to dimension is how deep my spout is going to go. So I'm going to go from the bottom of my spout up to the top of my beaker, and I'm going to measure that as about 15.
What does it say when it says?
Okay. Sometimes if I try to add a dimension, like right now all of my geometry is black, meaning it's fully constrained. If I tried to add another dimension here, like the length of that line, it'll say, do you want to make this dimension driven? Usually that pops up when you're trying to add a dimension that's redundant, that would potentially conflict with other dimensions that are on the page. So if you say make this dimension driven, and I say okay, it's going to gray it out. And this dimension is not driving, it's not changing the geometry, it's sort of just there as an indication of what, in this case, what the length of this line is. So if I go back in here and I change this one, because I said 15 but I wrote 25, you'll see that my geometry changed and this little driven dimension changed along with it. Normally, I'm not gonna you guys don't need to add driven dimensions. Usually if you're trying to add a dimension and it says, do you want to make this driven? It means maybe there are too many constraints already in place. So do you see that right now, Ty?
Yeah.
All right, let me check it out. All right. Probably. Oh yeah, and this is something. All right, I'll show yours on the. Or I'll show it up on here. So what happened to Ty? And this happens a lot in SolidWorks. If you don't know what to look for, so I'm going to just delete this dimension here. And this probably happened when you made your two blue lines back in the beginning. So I'm going to pretend like I'm going to make these again. If I make these two lines and I'm eyeballing it because I know I want it to be at roughly this angle, notice that SolidWorks put this secret dimension in here just because I was close to making it perpendicular. That dimension, that little relation means keep these lines perpendicular. I see that same dimension on your lines here. So if that happened, Like if these somehow were made to be perpendicular, I'm just going to delete these guys. I don't need to add anything else to this sketch, except that if I wanted to add this dimension, and that dimension, I wanted that dimension to be something else, like let's say 15, it's going to say, oh, you can't do that because it would change things. It would conflict with an existing relation. So for you, how I would fix that is pick this little perpendicular constraint. I just clicked on it, and I'm going to hit delete. On a Mac, it might not be the backspace key. You might have to like right-click that. You might have to right-click and then say delete. And you'll see that now when I go to add this dimension that I measured as 15 millimeters, this angle between these two lines isn't perpendicular. And that was the conflict. One relation was saying make it perpendicular, the other that you were trying to add would kind of force it to be not perpendicular. I just did, so to delete that perpendicular relation, to delete any relation, any of these little green boxes, you can right-click on the box. Oh, if you don't see these green things, it should be an option up here. Which one of these is relations? Not points. Wait. Yeah, view sketch relations. If this gets turned off, you won't see any of the relations. Make sure you guys have that on, because that's an important part of how we build things. All right, there was another question, yeah. Oh, this guy. Okay, well, I'll get rid of it and we can re-add it. All right, so that was back when I was talking about making these lines symmetric. So if I wanted to make them symmetric, to make anything symmetric, you want to pick one side of your symmetry. I'm going to hold shift, pick my symmetry line, my center line, and then I'm going to pick the thing on the other side of the center line that I want it to be symmetric to. I'm going to let go of shift, and then one of the relations that pops up should be symmetric over on the left side. And when I click it, it should add that relation here that says keep it symmetric. And I don't, because when I measured it, it said that the height here should be 15. And as Ty called out, when his was constrained as perpendicular, it wouldn't let him add a real dimension there. Cool. I know these are all like little nitty-gritty things. I'm glad you guys are asking this now because yeah. No, that's great. And honestly, like the best way to get through this stuff is to like work through it once and then you'll pick it up better later. Okay, so if we're still good here, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so right now, I'm going to get out of my sketch. I have a sketch that happens to be on the front plane. That is sort of the front view of my glass spout. And I also have roughly the cylinder that I'm going to use to make the outside of this glass, right? You guys are with me? Okay, so let's see. I could go ahead and make that surface. So I'm going to pick this sketch here. And I'm going to make an extruded surface. This is a different type of surface than the revolved surface. It's going to take that shape, and it's going to send it in a straight line. So I'm going to go far. I'm going to go all the way out, some arbitrary length that's like farther than this, because I have a feeling that I'm going to trim that from the top so it has a different shape. So you guys can just pick some arbitrary number. Usually, for my sanity, I'll type in something that ends in a 9, like 99.99 millimeters, because I know that's not a real dimension. It's something that was just like arbitrary for me to trim off later. Again, that's just like a, I don't know, pro tip. That way, anyone looking at my files, if they see like a 0.99 dimension, it's just like arbitrary. They can change it if they want. Okay, so I've got two surfaces now. I have this cylindrical surface, and I have this triangular surface that's open. I think I need one more surface though before I can do this trim as like a mutual trim. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I showed you guys like this big mutual trim before. We could do this sort of like step by step, and that might help a little too. All right, so we're gonna take these two surfaces and we're going to use them to trim one another. So this is special. This kind of trimming only works with surfaces. You can trim a solid with the surface, but it's sort of like a slightly different process. What we're gonna do is, again, still in the Surfaces tab, we're gonna go up to Trim Surface. I'm gonna click that. And there are a couple different types of trimming. Standard means you're gonna use a surface or a sketch to trim something. We're gonna do a mutual trim, which means we're gonna use two surfaces to trim one another. It sort of happens at the same time. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the surfaces that I'm going to use to trim. I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to use this one. You use them both. In this next section, so I'm going to click down here. It's going to let me either keep the sections that I click in this section, or remove the sections that I'm going to click in this section. It's up to you whether you want to remove them or keep them. I like to usually trim things away. So I'm going to remove that because I don't need that. I'm going to remove that because I don't need that either. And what I'm left with is my cylinder and this like strange triangle thing sticking out the front, which is kind of my spout. It's just not finished yet. If that looks good to me, I'm going to say okay. And I should have one surface body. Sure, we can go back into that. Let's say I botched that, or I wanted to change something. Any feature, I can click the icon of the feature, and usually the top left icon here lets me edit it. So I'm going to go back in and edit it. I'm just going to do this all over again one more time. So I'm going to make sure it's a mutual trim type. A standard trim will only let you pick one thing that you want to use is like the blade to cut, and everything else you're just going to trim away. Right? That's what a standard trim is like. Mutual trim is like a sort of like a power tool that will let you sort of chain a number of different trims together in a single feature. And it's nice when you have surfaces that intersect nicely like these do. Like they share a point here, and we do want to get rid of multiple, like a part of each of these surfaces. So I'm going to say mutual. The first selection box wants you to tell it what surfaces you want to interact with at all. And I want to interact with both of these surfaces. So I'm just going to pick them by clicking on them. Oh, are you sure that you're on mutual? Yeah. And it's possible that maybe you extruded as a solid. Oh yeah. Okay. So just get out of that for your first revolve. Oh, okay. Get rid of this. When you pick in a surface, it changes it from. I'm going to keep everything as a surface for now until after. You gotta make that sketch one more time. All right, I'm gonna edit this again and sort of pick these the way they're supposed to be. Oops. Remove these guys. Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep going here, Ty, but stop me if you get run into a problem with that trim. So the next thing that I'm gonna do is, and I guess I can go back here. So again, I'm just trying to break this last piece into a number of different sketches from different views. We did sort of the side view to make the revolve, to get like the main cylindrical shape of this piece of glass. We did a sketch from the front view to get roughly that triangle. And now I'm going to do a top view sketch because this spout sticks out in sort of a triangular shape as well. So I'm going to try and sketch that out from the top. Okay. So I'm going to sketch on the top plane, just from the top. Use my favorite button to square everything up. And then I'm going to rough in my triangle. And I'm going to do this poorly so that I can show you guys what constraints I'm going to add to. Make sure that when you made these two lines, you didn't get that like perpendicular relation to show up. Unless you wanted it to be perpendicular, sometimes it adds it. Okay. So I'm going to, same thing. I want this feature to be centered with my object. So I'm going to build a quick center line coming out of that origin. Sorry? Oh, no, I don't think so. The question was, does it matter how long your center line is? No. We are going to use it to dimension like how far out the spout should stick. But you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So I'm just going to make the center line to start. I'm going to say, make the tip of my triangle touch the tip of my center line. I just shift-clicked both of those points. I'm going to say merge. And now, oh, that's interesting too. So the center line that I created, see how it's not staying nice and vertical? If I want it to stay vertical, I can pick that line and say, as a relation, make sure it stays vertical. Usually when you try to sketch a line and it's close to vertical, SolidWorks will automatically add a vertical constraint. Sometimes it doesn't, just gotta check. That's why I also like to drag things around. After I add a relation, does it behave the way I imagine? So I know that this point is constrained to that center line now, because when I drag it, it only moves up and down. Okay, so I want that point to be coincident with the intersection of these 2 points, where those 2 surfaces came together. So I'm going to zoom back out here. If it's hard to kind of pick that, you can actually pick it in a different dimension. I want those 2 things to be coincident. Let me zoom back from the top and show you what happened again. I'm going to try and pick this point and the intersection point of my other 2 surfaces. Coincident. See how I'm kind of making that triangle of the spout? The next thing I'm going to want to do is find a way to dimension how far out my spout should protrude. I could do it from the side here. That's kind of a weird thing to try and measure because that's a curved edge. I could also try and dimension it from the center of my glass. I could dimension it from all the way across the back of my glass. I think that one's probably one I can measure pretty easily with my calipers. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to measure all the way across my glass here. It says it's about 110 millimeters. And I'll show you guys that dimension really quick. So I didn't measure that one. I went from the tip all the way across to the other side. Oh, it wants me to go to the middle here. Okay. So one thing I noticed is there's no point here for me to pick. Oh, there it is. Never mind. Let's dimension from that to that. There we go. What did I say? 110? Once you guys have found a way to build this triangle into a shape that you think looks correct, you're going to use that to make another extruded surface. So I'm going to go back to my Surfaces tab, say Extruded Surface, and this one I'm going to go all the way up as far as I can so that it goes through my entire object. This is another like arbitrary, doesn't matter how high. Good question. Did I exit the sketch first before I went to the extrude? No, that time I didn't. If you're in a sketch and you go to like the surfaces tab or a feature tab and say what feature you want to create with that sketch, it should just bring you right into that feature. It's kind of a shortcut. You can also exit out of the sketch and then click on the sketch and then click on the feature. Both of those ways work. You guys with me? So I'll show you the other way that you can do that too. Let me just delete that feature. So once I have my sketch, like let's say I was in this sketch and I finished it and it looks the way I want it to. I look at the top and I have, you know, my coincident point here, here, and I made this however long I think the spout should be. I can exit the sketch, and then when I go to make my surface feature, I'll just pick that sketch again over in my feature tree, so it's highlighted over here, and then pick, where is it? Extruded surface. Yeah. Okay, we'll take a look. All right. Okay. Oh, you're like so close. So remember, we're gonna try and use a mutual. The reason we do that is we're gonna use both surfaces. Now you should be able to pick the areas in way. And just hit got it. And then. Yeah, I sketched on the top plane triangle that we're going to use to make that surface right here. So I sketched, my top plane is like way down here by the bottom. It doesn't matter because I'm going to extrude that surface all the way to the top. Okay, I think I see what it is. So get out of this feature. A self-intersecting feature usually means there's like a straight line that you accidentally put into the sketch. So if you go back to that, zoom in, see how there's like an extra there? There might be an extra line in there. Try maybe just that. Okay. However, isn't sure what it means for two lines that overlap one another, and that's one of the reasons you might. Got it? I'm gonna show that one really quick too. So Carly just asked, or she was having trouble having her surface actually extrude, and I think what happened was somehow there was another line that got added in here just accidentally. So there's a line here, and then there's a line there. SolidWorks doesn't know what to do when two lines sort of like share the same space, and it gives me an error. And it shows up in the feature tree over here as like a red feature. That means, there's something wrong with this sketch, or with this feature. So all we had to do to fix it was go back into the sketch, find that feature, and get rid of it. And when we left the sketch, it should work out. Okay. You guys are sticking with me. Oh, the like from this to that. Oh, I see what you mean. We did that dimension a different way. We did it this way. just because it was easier for me to get my calipers from the front here all the way to the back. Yeah. It was, yeah, what is it? I mean, and that's something too you can kind of change later. When you fillet a cornered edge, sometimes it like shrinks the dimension because the corner disappears. So sometimes it's good to go back and kind of measure after you make a fillet, and you'll tweak stuff anyway. So get it close, and then we can change it. Okay, so I've got my surfaces here, and I think I'm ready for another trim. So I'm going to go back into trim surface, and we'll try a standard trim this time, because I think I'm just needing to use this surface to trim this surface. So I picked the surface I want to use as like a knife. And then I'm going to, in the second area over here, remove the front of that surface here, leaving everything else behind. And I'll say OK. Now, notice when I do it as a standard trim, the surface I used as the trim surface sticks around. I can hide that if I want to. Like, I don't need that anymore. And the way that I hid that is there's this little magical folder that appears after you start making surfaces. You can open it up and pick any of these surfaces and say show, or you can say hide. And there's my spout. Okay. It's close. It's a sharp spout. But it's easier for me usually to build with very rigid geometry and then add curves later. So I'm going to start adding a few fillets here. The bottom of my spout is nice and curved. So I'm going to, in my Surfaces tab, pick Fillet. Pick that bottom corner right there, and then fillet it. And this is something, this fillet would be kind of tricky to measure. I'm just going to try and eyeball it so that it has about the right proportions. And maybe I need it to be a little bit smaller than 12. Okay. See how that kind of filleted out. The other one I want to add is on this edge right here. Huh, that's weird how it shows it way out like that. We'll see if that stays that way. How big do we want it to be? I'm going to change the size on this a little bit too and say okay. And usually after I create a fillet or something, I'll rotate around just to make sure that things resolve in a way that I was kind of hoping for them to resolve. Carly, you have a question? No, it's fine. Okay, let's check it out. The rest of you guys work on your fillet and see if you can get it to resolve. I just eyeballed it and I put it at like 10 millimeters. Try to get it to be like proportionately about. Usually, all right, so for these models, because they're mostly appearance models, I'm trying to get you guys to go through geometry. I want the key dimensions, like the width of this cylinder to be.
I did like 7.
That's fine. I'm not going to be checking it. If it's way off, I might be like, maybe you could have estimated that differently. But I'll say okay. Okay. So you pick the tool you want to trade. Try to remove. And in some reason, it doesn't want. So say okay. Probably a small problem with looks like they intersect, but it's possible that like where they let's write X on go back or go back in there. Good, look at try threading with this surface. You can remove the side of that. I was just kind of curious to see if clearly there is like so let's see if we can find it. So find the equal. Yeah, now try to remove that. Okay, there might be something. Mind if I try? Yeah. What was the dimension for this? I think I used like 10, and then for the other, like the fillet on the curve, I had 5. I'm gonna go back. One of the things I'll do is, and it's so hard to draw that little line. That looks right. Kind of like going first the surface. So the last thing that I would suggest going up is let me go back in here to some of the things and delete that one little line. I don't know why. It's possible there was like something else here going on. I hate when that's the solution, but let's try it really quick. Same thing, like doing this way off. Make sure every single that. Oh, and that little menu that popped on this. You can also it's strange that it's just like I'm just like trying to be super. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I just rebuilt. Did anything like jump out at you as like, oh, that's cool. Cross your fingers. One. Get rid of. Like this. probably. I wish I could tell you why that's happening. Although maybe what I'll do is move on. Yep. That's really. I don't know why that happened. Start again. First, how did you get your? Oh yeah. So go ahead and pick the save early, save off. Everyone, if you haven't saved yet, save. Charlie's file just blew up, and then she has to start over. All right. So pick the edge, and it's all we make it smaller. Like do something like 5. It might have just been too big. If it's so big that it like would delete that triangle, like it's trying to replace this entire surface of it, then okay, so we're gonna go into picking. Carly, do what you can to catch up. Actually, what's your email? I'm gonna email you this file really quick, and then you can follow along. Hold on one second. Lesson 03 demo.
Compliment by Laura.
Okay, Giles dot. Oh, you're right there. It's gonna have me quit SolidWorks. Okay. All right, let me know if you can get that open, Carly. Okay, cool. So for the rest of you guys, are we close on, like we have a surface, it's got some fillets, it's got a spout looking kind of thing. Real quick while we wait for Carly to see if it opens. It did, yay. If, for example, we wanted to change how big that spout was, I could like go into one of those sketches and it should update here how long the spout is. All I'm doing there is like I'll highlight one of the surfaces, or excuse me, one of the features. Dimensions should pop up, and then I should be able to like slow click on one of those dimensions and then say, oh yeah, I want it to be 112 instead. Feel free to try and tweak one of your dimensions. You can always do this stuff later too. Okay, yes, Cole.
We do the same to
Yeah? You could try. Yep. So the question was, if further down the line, after you've built a lot more things into this part, if you wanted to change, for example, the shape of this V, if you wanted to make it more narrow, for example, could you? The answer is, yeah, you could try. In my experience, the more features you build after a sketch like this, the more likely it is that some of those features will fail after you change the underlying geometry. Later on in the semester, we'll talk about setting up master sketches to build from so that you can make parts that are more easily adjustable. There is sort of like a set of best practices to do that, and that's kind of how I work today. Like if I'm building a file that isn't, for an example, in class right now, almost all of my sketches, almost every single sketch piece of geometry will end up in a single or two master sketches, and every part is sort of derived from that later on, which will make what you were asking about, Cole, a lot easier later. That's like so far beyond what we're doing right now, I wouldn't worry about that. Just know that if you are going to want to adjust a dimension or make sure it's super accurate, to try and get it as close as you can earlier on in your model so you have less updating and fighting to do in your model later on. If you do need to adjust it, we can kind of tackle that down the road. Okay. Welcome back. Okay, so for those of you who are like click following along, hopefully we all have surfaces that look something like this. We used a revolve. We used two sketches in two different planes, a front view of our spout, wherever that sketch was, here. We used a top view of our spout sketch. We made two different surfaces, intersected them, and with the exception of Carly, everyone's surfaces sort of didn't explode SolidWorks. Everyone saved their file by now. We've added a couple fillets, and we're ready for the next step. So after we have the shape of our glass pretty close, and I think it's close enough for me to be happy with it, we're going to turn this surface into a solid part by thickening it and giving it like some actual, I guess, thickness, right? Actual dimension here. So the tool that we use for that is in our surfaces panel, and it's called, I should look over here, it's called Thicken. Where are you, Thicken? There you are. So what you're going to want to do is pick Thicken, and then it wants you to pick a surface. So I'm going to pick this surface. Now there are a couple things I get to do here. One of them is pick whether my Thicken, and I get a little preview here, thickens to the outside of my surface, thickens on both sides of my surface, or thickens on the inside of my surface. Now, all the dimensions I was taking on this were on the outside. So I'm going to thicken to the inside of my surface, and I'm going to measure about how thick this is. There is a little, like, bead on the edge of this surface here. So the measured dimension is probably a little bit thicker than it actually is. For this model, it's not going to make a big difference. I'm going to say it's about a 2 millimeter wall thickness. So once I decide, yep, on the inside, I'm going to type in 2 millimeters, make sure it looks the way I imagine it should look, hit green check mark, and now I have a solid. If I want, so I know that Photo View is like the plugin here for rendering things. I hate it. It works awfully on almost everyone's computer. There is one small thing that I will do sometimes in SolidWorks to make it easier for me to understand what parts are in SolidWorks, and that is once you create a solid body, you can open this menu, and oh man, I did that without even saying what I was doing here. Up at the top, there's this little triangle. The top of your feature tree, there's a expansion triangle thing. It opens a hidden menu, and it will let you change the appearance of your part. I just want to make this transparent. There's this little like transparent button. It looks like glass. Cool. It also lets me select through this part if I'm trying to like pick geometry for another feature. That's about as far as I would go. Maybe changing the color of something in your parts. We'll talk about that later too. So it looks kind of like glass. I'm just sort of double checking. If right now is a good time, if I think I want to change the geometry here, like maybe this radius should be, this fillet should be a little bigger. I'm gonna go back into that fillet and I can edit the feature here and say, maybe I want it to be 6 instead of 5. Okay. And it looks like it updated all right for me too. Cool. Save. All right, so that's it for the glass part. The next thing that we're going to do, and I know this is probably where the other half of the class who's still kind of looking for some help, and that's in building these leg features and then using a circular pattern to sort of move them around and make 4 copies in a circle. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to draw one of these legs in a sketch. And I'm just going to put this on the right plane for now. So sketch on the right plane. Make sure I'm looking at the right plane. Doesn't matter which side. And yeah. Oh, I'm just going to start a new sketch so I can start building these metal legs. So pick a plane. I'm sketching on the right plane. You can sketch on right plane or front plane. And then seeing this, let's see. I'll go to this feed here really quick. So I noticed that, well, let's pick a different leg here. Okay. The metal leg here sits just to the outside of my glass. So I'm going to build it just to the outside of my glass. I think I am going to build it as a surface and thicken it again, because we were doing a bunch of surface stuff. Okay, so I'm going to just rough in the shape really quick. So I'm going to use a straight line and just kind of block out the rough shape of that leg. Take it all the way over to the middle here. And I'm being careful of what little green relations pop up. Notice like there wasn't a perpendicular that popped up between these 2 lines. If one did pop up for you, now's a good time to like catch that and delete it. All right. Now I'm going to make sure that my metal piece touches my glass piece once they're all the way together. I could leave a little bit of a gap. Maybe we should leave a little bit of a gap. Yeah, let's leave a little gap. I'm changing my mind right now. I'm going to dimension a little space in between our metal leg and the glass here. Call it just like really small, 0.5 millimeter. I'm also going to do that on the bottom. So from the bottom of the glass to where my metal starts, I'm going to say just 0.5 millimeter gap. Why am I doing that? I guess it's something for further down the road. When we start rendering these things, parts that intersect or touch one another kind of render a little differently than parts that have a little bit of space. So we're just going to leave a little bit of space in there. I'm also going to make a little center line and connect it to the origin here and just put it, it doesn't matter how tall it is, but I'm going to make sure that this line stops somewhere on the center line. So I'm going to pick them both and say coincident. And if I zoom back in here, you'll see that if this line were to extend all the way down like the entire length, this thing would be on that center line. Did you draw one? I drew a center line. I like constructed one. Sorry, I don't mean to be going fast. If I'm going fast, just tell me to like slow down too. Okay. So I've got part of this sort of defined. I need to kind of define the leg shape here. So let's see. First things first, when I look at this curve of my leg, I think I maybe I thought about it this way the last demo too. It looks kind of symmetrical, like the curve on the outside here kind of looks similar to the curve here. So to kind of keep everything symmetrical, I might actually build in that relationship with another center line. So I'm going to pick, all right, so if I zoom way in here to my leg, you'll see when I add this line, I can add it anywhere. But I can actually affix it to the middle of this line here. And there are a couple ways to do that. If I hover close to the middle of this line, this little like yellow point will appear. That means I'm picking the center point of that line. And this little like center point relation pops up. Cool. Then I can shift and pick the end of my center line and say, make them coincident. And it should always be in the middle of this line. There's another way to do it too. So let's say, okay, I draw my center line here. I can also like right click on a line and say select midpoint. If it's hard for me to like pick it out with my mouse, I can do it that way too. And make those coincident. Okay, so this is kind of floating at the moment. I'm going to add another construction line between these 2 points. I'm going to make the end of this construction line hit the center of this construction line. Oops, I didn't mean fixed. Shoot. I'm going to get rid of that little fixed relationship. I want that to be in the center of that. Okay, I'm going to move this around a little bit. Yeah, it looks like it's staying in the center, but it's still not quite the way I want it to be. I'm going to say, maybe make these things, actually, you know what? We'll see about that. So this, I want to be symmetric about this center line. So I picked all 3 and I say make symmetrical. And now when I move them around, things start moving around as a group. Okay, we're getting somewhere. So this process of like adding dimensions, what it's going to do is allow me just to have more control over the shape of these curves. It's a bit tedious to add so many like relations and dimensions when you're building a curve. You guys could just use the spline tool and curve something. I'm just sort of showing you a different way of constraining this geometry. All right, I'm going to make those things perpendicular. Okay. And now I'm going to kind of figure out where this point should be in relation to my glass. So that's something I can measure. I'm going to try and figure out what that dimension is. I'm going to measure that really quick. Yeah, ask away. Missing a couple. All right, let me get out of here really quick. So you're saying you only have a couple dimensions up here, or relations. The midpoint one is probably the only one you need. The way to tell is like grab that point and move it around and see what happens. And if your lines become disconnected, you might have to add a new dimension. Now, me moving this around added like a third one of those constraints. Sometimes it will add them. It seems redundant to me. Yeah, then I think you're probably fine. Yeah.
It moves like the corner around, but
It's moving this one,
no, it moves like the middle, like all that around, but
not this end.
like that end.
Okay. Can you move this one around?
I can move it up and down.
But you can't move it this way? So it's possible that there's something tying this point to something above it. You see another relationship Sometimes like a bird. It looks like it's moving a bunch of. You're fine. Mine like added a bunch of other ones because I've been dragging stuff around. All right, let's keep going and see if when we add these dimensions, you get your lines to look the same. Okay, so the dimensions I was gonna add. Oops, let me get out of that. Dimension of this line. It's like how far from the center of my leg to the foot is it before the foot starts? It's like 37. So 37. Okay. How far off the bottom? Here, I'll kind of zoom in again. How far from the bottom of my glass is it to like where my curve stops on the outside? I'm just trying to find some things that I can measure to make sure that this is pretty close. I would say that's probably about like 8 millimeters. Okay. How long is the leg? I should be able to measure that. And notice, like, it's measuring from, like, this imaginary point that's, like, kind of beneath the surface of the glass here to the very tip. Again, I'm just trying to get a dimension that's, like, pretty close. So, 15, it says 16, and that's probably another millimeter, so I'm going to say 17. And then how wide is that foot down near the end? It looks like about 8 millimeters. Huh. Cool. And mine moved. Very strange. Let's see if I delete that. Yeah, that's interesting how that like snaps it up like that. From the center? At the center point of... Yeah. Okay, we're gonna try... I'm going to try making that perpendicular really quick. Okay, so mine was like getting kind of strange. Really off? Okay. I'm going to come around and see. So, again, like adding dimensions and have that edge and these points, everything is black.
So what did I
What I did, for some reason mine did another good time. Yep. Solidworks is very good. Now you should try it. Oh yeah, I think that's a plane orientation thing, and it's also Ray. Yeah, hers is moving the other way. Yours is going the opposite way. So the way that I found to fix it was make a relationship between this line, the two construction lines, so all of them would be now make sure that this line is perpendicular to that line. So the moral of the story with dimensions and relations is like add them incrementally until you get fixed geometry that looks like the way you want it to. Sometimes I'd say it's common to go through and try to build a sketch one way and then you'll see like part of it move. You might have to change how you dimension it. None of the dimensions that we're adding follow like best practices for dimensioning an object. This is sort of like the hack job way of building geometry. But again, this is an appearance model, so it's actually a lot faster to kind of like hack some of this stuff together. Master Sketch will solve some of that later. Yeah, and mine is just again, it'll make a flip, right? So you can change that to be, as long as this is close to the way I
Good job.
yeah, get rid of that. It did delete I would add it there to make yeah, I think that's fine. Because it will, well, I mean, we can add those. Let's do like just one more sketch. We're going to get to that here very shortly. Okay. All right, you guys sticking with me here? Still alive, but barely. Okay. One more thing I want to add here is how tall this leg is from the bottom of my glass. So that's something I can measure. So let me zoom out here. So I'm going from the bottom of the glass up to the top of wherever this leg is going to be. You could do the bottom line. You would just have to find a measurement for that. So I'm doing because I can measure from the bottom of the glass right here. I'm picking the glass. and that's about 140. So 140, hooray. Yeah, I went from like this origin point right here. Okay, so quick recap. I used a bunch of straight lines to sort of outline the shape. We found a set of constraints and dimensions to try and fix that geometry in a shape that looks close to how it looks in real life. And now that we have a sketch that looks the way we want it to, we can start to use it to actually create our legs, okay? So, like I mentioned before, I'm gonna stick with surfaces for now, and I'm still in my sketch here. I can go over to surfaces and say extruded surface, and if I rotate, you'll see it's starting to make a leg. Okay, so that's a dimension I can take. How thick is the leg? Let's see, it is 12, a little less, or a little more than 12, so I'm going to say it's 12 millimeters wide. The other thing I'm going to do is if I look at this from the top, notice how it's off-center. My leg is like off-center, and if I look at these legs, they should center up in the middle here. So there's something I can change under the options for the direction of my extrude. Rather than going blind in just one direction, I can say mid-plane. So extrude from the mid-plane. It's going to put my sketch in the middle of the extrusion. You see what that did there? Blind has it come off one way, mid-plane extrudes from the center. Yep, and I'm going to say OK. And if I look, I should have my surface. Okay, we're getting there. So just like the other surface we used to create the spout, I'm going to add a few fillets to make this look curvy like it does in real life. Curvy, technical term. So let's see, I'm going to add a fillet there. I'm going to add a fillet there. I can do 2 fillets at the same time, that's fine. Let's bump those up. Technically I think both will work, but I would do it under surfaces because we're trying to fillet a surface. 18 looks like it's about the right size. I'm going to say OK and take a look. Yeah, that looks about right. To fillet this guy right here, let's see, let me go to fillet again. I could add a fillet to, wow, and that's like really big. Let me change that for a second. I could add a fillet to both of these corners and then like mess with the size until it, you know, gets pretty close. Or I can use a different kind of fillet. There's a fillet called a full round fillet that will let me pick 3 different surfaces and it will connect them all with a fillet. So that's what I'm going to try. Full round fillet. There's my first surface. There's my second surface. There's my third surface. And see how it connects all 3 of those with a single fillet. I like that because it's really clean and it updates really nicely too. And if I look at my object here, it does fillet all the way around. There is no like flat on the edge. Okay. So now I have my surface. I want this to have thickness too, just like my glass does, before I do my circular pattern. So I'm going to go up to, in my surfaces panel here, I'm going to go to thicken again. And then I'm going to choose my surface. Once again, it's going to ask me, do I want this on one side of the part, on both sides, or on the other side? I think I want this to thicken so it doesn't intersect with the glass, right? Because all of the metal is in the outside of the glass. So I'm just going to pick whatever option it looks like does that for me. And then the thickness of this metal, if If I measure it with my calipers, looks like it's about 1 millimeter. It's really thin. So I'm going to say 1 millimeter. And then this little checkbox down here that says merge result. This is something that will continue to be an important part of when you're building objects, especially multiple bodies or multiple solid objects within the same part. If I leave that box checked and I say, yes, finish this feature, if this feature that we're building, this surface, happens to touch another part, another solid body in my file, it will combine them and it will make them one part. If I uncheck this box, even if this surface here intersects with another body, and we tried to plan so that it didn't, but even if it did, it's not going to combine those parts together. It's going to leave them as separate parts so that we can still do things to them independently. So I'm going to uncheck that box because I don't want this metal piece to combine with anything else right now. Say OK, and let's take a look. Cool. So I've got a leg. Nice. I'm going to save. Basically, after like every sketch or every feature, if you're like happy with it, save. Okay. Next thing we're gonna do is circular pattern. Okay, so I want 4 of these things because my French press has 4 legs, and there's a couple cool ways that we could do that. We could mirror, we could mirror and then pattern. There are a bunch of ways we could do it, but I want to do a circular pattern. So I'm going to go to my features tab, which is where I find all of the things to do with pattern. Instead of clicking linear pattern, I'm going to hit the arrow below it and find another secret hidden menu. One of the options is circular pattern, so I'm going to click that. And a whole bunch of different boxes come up. Like so many other menus in SolidWorks, SolidWorks will want you to pick the things that you want to affect with this feature, and then some sort of reference geometry in order to do that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to check this bodies box. What I'm patterning is this entire solid body, that thing that we created earlier. It's its own feature, or it's more than just a feature. We used a sketch and some fillets and a surface and a thicken. We used a bunch of features to create that part, that body. So I want to pattern all of that as a body. Okay, so that's the thing I want to pattern. Where do I want to pattern it? So this little first box here says, give me something circular or an axis to pattern around. Fortunately, my glass has some circles, so I'm going to pick one of those circles. And it gave me this preview of exactly what I wanted. Now, sometimes that's not going to happen. Sometimes it'll say maybe these numbers are different, right? Or maybe I want to change them. Maybe I want 6 legs instead of 4. I can do that by clicking up and down in this menu. When this equal spacing checkbox is picked, it will put this number of objects, 4, in this amount of the circle. 360 degrees is all the way around a circle. If I wanted, for example, to only pattern halfway around the circle, see how it put 4 legs evenly spaced halfway around the circle. Sometimes that's something you'll want to do. So the question was, how did I click the leg? Let me go back here. So by default, features and faces is checked. I don't want to pick features or faces to pattern. I want to actually pick bodies. So I'm going to check bodies first, and then I'm going to pick my leg. Did that work? Okay. And same thing. Okay, so it left me 360 degrees. I picked that circular edge on my glass to pattern around, and I'm going to do 4 legs. Looks pretty good. What's the other thing that's going to happen here? Oh, you can skip instances to vary. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to say, okay. Let's go back. if it doesn't want you to put 360 degrees, there's a good chance that your equal spacing box isn't checked. I would check that first. Otherwise, you're just telling it to like pattern move one instance of that object all the way back around and put it exactly where it started, which Solidworks doesn't like. Solidworks is picky. Okay. Okay, so now you guys should be looking at 4 legs. Notice if you have your solid bodies folder open in your feature tree over here, right here, that it created them as their own solid bodies. Now we have 4 different legs that are all, they all exist like as independent parts. Now technically, if we looked at this really closely and talked about how this was made, they're like fastened together, but they're not actually all different parts. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to combine them together because this, for all practical purposes, the metal on this is just one part. So I'm going to combine bodies to make one part. Is just one little feature, kind of like you would find in Adobe Illustrator or something. Where are you? Combine. Oh, it's in a different tab that doesn't exist here. So it's in a tab called Direct Editing. So if you don't have the Direct Editing tab, like I don't, I can right click on any tab and say Open Direct Editing. Okay. This is where you'll find things that deal with like combining or intersecting bodies. I'm going to combine 2 bodies, add them together. Which ones do I want to combine? I'm going to pick all 4 legs and then say okay. Now that's all just one part. And if I look at my solid bodies, there we go, it's just one part. I did that for just simplicity's sake. Yes, Cole. Let me take a look. It might be what you're using to pattern around.
Was the operation type?
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Was this the operation type?
What time is it? Like 7:30. Why don't you do one more round and see if you can help? All right. I know this is like a super long click-through tutorial. Hopefully this is like helping at least a little bit here. I know this is all very specific stuff.
I'm learning so much.
Okay. That's just every time I look out, everyone's got the SolidWorks face on, which is like, and it's hard. I just need that positive feedback sometimes. I'm gonna keep asking to make sure you're okay.
What's it mean when it says rebuild error? It says unable to create single body.
Oh, okay. So if there's an error that pops up when you try to combine everything together, there's a good chance that maybe those things weren't touching in the first place, or instead of just saying comment, hit add. Yeah, that's it. So I'm not gonna bring that up because that's like a default thing. All right. Okay, you guys are still with me. Awesome. One more thing I'm gonna do here. No, I'm not gonna do that yet. Okay, we'll cut the triangle thing. So if you look closely at the at my legs here, they have like this triangle top part. We could have done that. Oh, sure, actually, let's do that beforehand. So we're gonna go back in time. We're gonna use a special feature of SolidWorks of the feature tree, which allows us to go back in time before we did something. So we're going to grab this little blue line down here, and you have to like hover your mouse exactly over it. It's only like 1 pixel thick. It's super annoying. I'm going to click and drag that up to above my circular pattern. So what I'm effectively doing is like rewinding back in time to before I did that pattern feature. Because I want to cut out 2 little notches on the top of my legs and then have that get patterned when I do the pattern. So I went back in time. Correct. Yeah, it's going to do it to just one as opposed to all of them. It's really tough to see. It's this like blue line that's down at the bottom of your feature tree. And I'm going to drag it to just before the circular pattern. Alternatively, if you can't drag that silly line, you can right click on a feature and then say roll back. I'm rolling back those features, meaning like I'm going back in time before that feature. Both of those work. Okay, so how am I going to cut those? There are a couple ways. Any ideas how I might like cut some angles on the top of this? I could extrude. I could draw a sketch and do an extrude cut. Yes. There's an even quicker, maybe hackier way to do it. You guys know you can round a corner by adding a fillet. You can also chamfer. Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna go to our feature menu, and where it says fillet, secret. There's a chamfer there too. I can click that edge, and wow, that fillet is way too big. So I'm going to like, I'm sorry, that chamfer is way too big. Yeah. You might want to zoom way in. You should be able to click both of those. And if you click them both and they don't both show up, it's because it's still like too big of a chamfer. And let's see if we can like change the angle.
Did you say fillet?
Fillet? Fillet the edge. Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, I'm gonna get out of this menu really quick. The problem was she couldn't scroll down in her feature tree far enough to get that thing. If you can scroll down far enough to see the circular pattern, you see a circular pattern? Okay, right click circular pattern and then say roll back. And it should move the blue line up for you auto-magically. Maybe, Liam, could you help her out really quick? Okay, so I'm going to go back to to chamfer my edge. For some reason, it wasn't liking me doing this both at the same time, so I'm going to just do one side at a time. I can like change the angle of this thing. And, ooh, wow, that's way too big. I could actually measure that. It looks like the length of that edge is about, it's like halfway, it's like 10.5, sure. 10.5. And it goes maybe about that far. 10.5, 25 degrees, sure, it looks close. I'm going to say, okay. And then I'm going to do another chamfer on the other side. And the same parameters didn't work. I'm going to try the other, let's see. Let's see. I wonder why. Oops. 10.5. Yeah, 10.5. I wonder if I can like change.
What is the global variable?
Where do you see that?
It's just giving me the option to, and I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, definitely no. Didn't say no. I don't know why that.
I tried like
Get out of
clicking
this.
out,
Yeah.
and I tried doing it again.
Wait. Just hit X out. Make sure you're not clicking anything like zoom out. Make sure you're not accidentally selecting something else. Like click Okay. Welcome to Fillet Monster, or I guess Chamfer Monster in this case. This is not doing what I want it to do. There's another way that you can create a chamfer called distance distance. And it's gonna basically say what distance from the point on like that you selected you want in one direction and what distance do you want in the other direction. It's just another way to make a chamfer. That is working better. It says 3 and 10. I'm gonna say okay. I'm gonna go back to my other chamfer and change it to do the exact same thing. Like 3, oops, maybe I'll switch them around. 10 and 3, say okay, okay. If that looks close enough that I'm happy, I'll just be like, done. If I want to adjust that, I can change like how far in those cut. Maybe I want it 3.5 millimeters. How did I change the chamfer? I went back, let me slow that down a little. So I can edit this feature and then I can just check the other method of defining a chamfer. Okay, so I've got my angles cut in there. Yeah, okay, that's what I'm looking for. Once you have that close enough so that it looks like your real life object. Oh, if you want to edit them. If I wanted to tweak it, I can just like regular click one of these and they should pop up. Yeah, and then you should be able to, if you want to, you can click on one of those dimensions if SolidWorks likes you and will be nice to you and change it. Yeah, I changed them to 10 and 3.5. Again, I'm just like approximating at this thing. Yes, Cole? The chamfer? Oh, okay. All right. Once you guys have your chamfers in, you can roll forward, so you can drag that blue line down to the end of your sketch and see the patterns that up all the way up. Okay, so that's something. Somewhere it must be touching. It looks like medium. Okay, so yeah. Yep. Well, I'm going to use body. That's body. And then hopefully I'm going to work. Where's my circle? Okay, so four of them. 90 degrees. Or I could say I want 4 equally spaced all the way around the circle. Either way would work.
Pumping on.
Just do the legs. Don't add okay. Did it work for you guys? Yeah, pattern around? Cool. So, and you can do that with anything. Like if we notice there's like a Bodum logo on a leg and I want to add it to all the legs, I can roll back in history, add it to one, and then it should add it to everything once I roll forward in time. Okay, we're 7:50. Oh, we got lots of time. Okay, I'm going to try to roll. Oh, another super handy shortcut. Yes, you can try and drag this down to the end. Or the other way you can do it is just right click anywhere on your feature tree and say roll forward. Or roll to end. And it'll do the same thing. I hate trying to grab that blue line. They need to make it like at least a pixel wider. It's silly. Okay, so there's my legs. Now we want to add some other things here. So we've got like this cylinder that connects to all my legs, that eventually connects to the handle. I could start with that one. I'd imagine that's going to be pretty straightforward. I could just build a circular sketch, and then extrude it down and have it hit. I could show you guys that. All right, let's do that. I'll just keep going the way that I would build this. Oh, one thing I notice is, okay, right now, if I look at the top of my, or like the top-ish of my, what is this? French press? Yeah. What is this? Solidworks. I see that the spout is lined up with one of the legs, but in real life, the spout is actually in between two of those legs. That's an easy fix. I can do something also in my direct editing tab to move a body. So I'm going to use this thing called move or copy bodies. What one do I want to move? Because I built my glass piece in the correct orientation, like the right view is the right view, I just want to move the legs around. I'm going to move those legs. And where is, oh, okay, translate, rotate. Isn't that funny? Another hidden thing. Let me get out of that and show you one more time. So I'm going to move and copy things. I scroll all the way down to the bottom and say, I'm not moving them, I'm actually doing something called rotating, which is a different kind of move. Which body, that's the body. It's going to want, let's see. Wait, what? Why did that translate, rotate? I don't want to translate. I want to rotate. Oh, hidden menu. Okay, cool. I want to rotate around the center. So actually, I might want to throw an axis in here. Hold on a sec. Okay, I wanted to check this before I told you. So anytime you make something that's a revolved or like a circular shape, it creates this hidden center axis, like a hidden axis in the middle of an object. I can use that, and I'm going to use that as reference geometry here. In order to turn those on, just like turning on or off anything, it's in this little eyeball menu. And it's this one here called temporary axes. I'm going to say turn it on. And I see this like blue dotted line show up in the middle. Good. That is what I'm going to rotate my legs around, because I know that's right in the middle of my object. How far am I going to rotate? I'll let you guys tell me. To get my legs from this position to that position, how far is that? 45. Half of 90, right? 90 would go all the way to here. So I'm going to type in 45 degrees. Sometimes this little copy box is checked. That's fine if you want to make a copy in that new location. We just want to move the existing part, so I'm going to make sure that that's not checked. I'm going to say OK. And okay, it looks like it's lined up the way I like it. Yay, so I'm going to go back and turn my view of temporary axes back off because I think it's just, it clutters things up. I'm going to save. Okay, we're getting closer. The next thing I think I might want to try building is this like metal collar that connects all of my legs together. And it also has these little features that pop out that I can attach my handle to. So, let's see. Well, it looks like it attaches to the top of where my my legs are. Need to find words to describe all these things too. So I'm gonna actually sketch on that plane. So I'm gonna pick the top of one of these. Just gonna pick it so it turns blue. And then either in the shortcut menu where it says sketch or all the way under the sketch menu, I'm gonna say sketch. And it has me sketching on the top of that plane. If I say, show me that plane, cool. I'm sketching on the top view here. Show me that plane. Okay. So let's see. I think what I'm gonna do is build the top view of this circle here. So I'm going to start by, let's see, bringing my circle out to, actually I'm just gonna like bring the circle out somewhere. And then I'm gonna say I want my circle to touch the inside of that. And let me see if you can see what I did there. So I said make it tangent with the inside edge of my leg here. Yep. I'm actually gonna do another circle. So I'm using the origin point. It put this origin like right in the middle of my plane, which is great. To start my circle, I'm going to drag it way out, bigger than I need it, so it doesn't accidentally attach to something I don't want it to. And then I clicked a line and clicked my circle and said, make it tangent. And I just went ahead and made 2 circles. Yeah, go for it. Unless you want to do this as a surface again. Do we want to do it as a surface again? Nah, okay. Alright, that's fine. So, if I were to extrude this circle, I don't mean to move this around so much. If I were to extrude this circle, and I can preview it if I go to features and say extrude it, see it's giving me my ring. But what it isn't giving me is like these little features that like bend out and allow me to attach to the handle. So no, I didn't. I clicked on my feature extrude boss base just to see what it would look like. I'm not going to do it yet. I'm going to add some other things to this sketch. So I'm going to say nope. I'm going to look back at the top of my sketch here. And if it's annoying, like this glass is sort of getting in my way, it's hard for me to see what's the glass line, what's the sketch line, I can right click on that glass and say hide. And it'll just hide it from view for now. I think it's going to make my life a little bit easier. If you just right click on any object, one of the millions of options that show up is hide. Alternatively, you can right-click the body over in your tree and say hide here. There's like 8 ways to do everything. I hate it. And I love it. And I hate it. And I love it. Okay, so I hid my sketch. The spout was down here, if I remember correctly. and my handle attaches up here. I just need to sketch out where that handle attaches. So I'm just going to start drawing a couple lines in here that kind of look like what that handle might look like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I know that my handle is on the center line, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw a center line in here too as a reference, like that. Cool. I could actually mirror these over. Okay, so I'm going to dimension a few things. How far out do these attachment points stick from the ring here? So I'm just going to use my calipers and kind of get a measurement. It looks like it's about 15 millimeters. So I'm going to say from that line to like that point. Come on, pick. What did I say? 15? Like 15 millimeters. Okay. Notice if you drew these and it didn't already put them in place, both of these lines are vertical, meaning like if I try to drag them around, they stay vertical. They also get all like messed up. I know that the thickness of this metal is the same as the thickness of the ring. I think we said that was like 1 before. Like 1 millimeter thick. I also might want to measure about how far, I guess how much clearance there is between these two metal prongs, because I need to make room for my handle. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that with my calipers. Looks like it's about 8, and I'm going to say 8.5. I'll be right over. So what did I say? 8.5. In the meantime, I'm gonna save. Oh, and it gave me like crazy big arrows. Sometimes that happens when it saves. Yes. I didn't mean it.
When I try to draw the line,
It makes them like zip way out.
Yeah, sometimes if you draw a line from the circle, it wants to like make it tangent, like go over to the other side.
yeah.
A good way to prevent that from happening is start the line off the circle, and yeah, and then. No, we're just adding stuff to this. You're doing great. Doing great. Yes, hold.
So I can't combine.
This is sometimes. Sometimes it breaks it, which is good.
There was always something didn't work again.
Oh, let's see if we can do it like. Yeah, like this. I wonder I'll explain that. I'll explain that. Okay. So I measured the thickness of the handle that needs to fit in between these two prongs, and right now we just have one prong, as 8.5 millimeters. So I can dimension I sketched on a plane on top of one of these legs. You could do this on the top plane as well, and a month from now that makes more sense, but for now just sketch on the top of one of those planes. Okay, what was I saying? This dimension. Okay, because I'm dimensioning between a line and a center line, I can move my dimension across the center line, and it will let me dimension it this way. If your dimension is showing up as an angle for some reason as opposed to a millimeter distance, there's a good chance it's because one of these lines is not vertical. You can fix that by picking one of those lines and say, make it vertical.
Was our center line supposed to have a vertical?
Yeah. All right. I'm going to extend my center line by making another one all the way down to the bottom, like through the bottom of my object too. And I'm going to show you guys a way to do, and Eunice, you mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the spout V. We can mirror this geometry. Since we already added a bunch of geometry or dimensions to this, I don't want to have to repeat it on the other side to make the second prong. I'm going to use two tools. I'm going to trim some things with this trim tool. It looks like scissors. The default trim tool in Solidworks is awesome. It's called Power Trim, and it will let you click and drag and just slice through things, and it will make them magically disappear. It's awesome. It also can get you into some big trouble if you accidentally slice things you didn't mean to slice. And I've crashed a model more than one time, like accidentally slicing things and then trying to undo to get rid of that, and then it just like blows up, and then I have to cry a little bit. Yeah, so you go to Trim Entities, you can Power Trim, and I'm going to zoom in and Power Trim this stuff too. I'm going to get rid of those. Nope, this is all in that sketch. Yep, you're going to get rid of half the circle, then you're going to get rid of this gap here because we don't need a part there, and I'm going to get rid of this interior line right there. Sound effect included. So what you should end up with is like a half circle that connects to your prong with like no little lines in between here. All right, so I'm going to go back in time and do that again. Maybe if it lets me. Cool. I'm going to do it one more time. Then try again. So I'm going to use Trim Entities, Power Trim. In order to use Power Trim, I click and I drag. I should see a little line appear. If I don't move this line through any geometry, nothing's going to happen. But if I slice through something, it should go away. Yeah. It's like a ninja sword with your mouse. I'm going to do it here. Oh, bam. And then I'm going to do it here. Like that. 3 different trims. I'm going to say, okay. Trimming doesn't end up in your history or anything. So it's like, get it right the first time and then save. I saved again. Okay. I'm going to mirror this stuff now. Down here? Yeah, because we're going to mirror. Okay, so I'm going to use this tool called Mirror Entities. It will let me take anything, any like sketch entities, and then copy it, mirror it on the other side of a center line. We already have a center line, but it wants to know what I want to mirror. So I'm going to go through and one by one pick everything that I want it to mirror, and it highlights it in blue. So I'm going to pick the sides of my circle, the sides of my prong, and the end of my prong. So I picked all of those things. After I pick them, I'm going to choose what do I want them to mirror across or mirror about, and pick my center line. And I should see a preview of the evil twin of whatever I'm trying to mirror. I'm going to say, okay. And just like trimming, mirroring doesn't end up in your history or feature tree. So like, you don't get it right, undo right away and try to fix it. Okay, so now I have this. Thanks for sticking around, Dexter. See you Thursday. We've got a circle, we've got our double prong, and I'm happy because I don't see anything blue other than the end of this construction line, which doesn't change anything if I move it. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to use this sketch now and we're not doing a surface anymore, right? Because we built the inside and the outside of this entire thing. I haven't exited my sketch. You can exit your sketch. Exit or not, you're going to use this extruded boss base. And if you haven't already selected your sketch, go ahead and pick it now. You can see how this is extruding upward. Cool. Let's find out how far it needs to go. Looks like about 18 millimeters. So I'm going to add that dimension. Oh my goodness. Right in here. And if I want, I can merge result. Right now, because my glass part is hidden, Solidworks, even if I say merge result, won't try to merge it with the glass, which is good. It's also, down the road, something that will give you problems if you're like hiding things and merging things and then unhiding them, it might blow stuff up. So just know that sometimes things are not okay. I do want this to merge with my legs. I'm going to say, yeah, that looks good, and see what happens. Okay, cool. Now, one thing that you guys are going to notice, and this is like a tiny little detail that in the future I would want you to try and clean up, but for now I'm going to be okay with, is if you zoom way in on the intersection of these two things, see how I've got like a point sticking out of one, and then like it's not lined up on the inside of the other? That's because we built this as like a perfectly round thing, and we built these little guys as straight extruded surfaces. How could we correct for that? We could fundamentally, from the beginning, build these as like a small section of a revolve if we wanted them to be round. Don't worry about that. Or another thing we can do, and I again, this is too fine a detail for what I want you guys to be worrying about right now, is when we extruded this thing up, we'd say don't merge those things together, and we would actually like trim these surfaces down and try to create a loft that blends the top of each one of these items to the bottom of this surface. And if you look at this, that's actually what's happening, because these are flat and this is round, and it's a bent sheet metal part, and weird stuff happens when you bend sheet metal. For today, this is good. This is good. That's fine. One thing I do want to do though is So these little corners aren't supposed to be sharp. They're round, they're bent. And I'm going to go ahead and add that fillet, or those fillets. So in my features tab, I can go over to fillet. I'm going to go to regular old fillet. I'm going to start with the inside fillets here. And pick something that looks kind of close. I'm going to say that's probably about 2.5 millimeters. Pick something that looks close. You can always change it. And notice, all right, so I'm going to show you something. This is another little pro tip. If I wanted to, I could fillet the inside and outside of this edge at the same time. But if I look at the top, see how it would get like thicker in between here than the actual material thickness. Like that's a little bit thicker, and I'll show you why here. So I'm going to actually do that as a separate fillet. I'm going to do the insides as one thing, say, okay. And then I'm going to make a new fillet on the outside. Oh man, there we go. If you rotate this thing around a bunch and it like warps out of view so you can't see it anymore, and you're like, where's my model? I'm scrolling in and out and I don't see it. You can press F and it will recenter your model. That's like the panic. F. Where'd my model go? That's where it went. You can get it back. Okay, so I'm gonna increase the size of these fillets just a little bit. In fact, it should be 1 millimeter. And now if you kind of look at the top of this, it should be the same thickness roughly all the way through this right here. Is there a way to do it what? Like lines up correctly? Yeah. Yes, there's always another way. Probably the more fundamental right way to do it would be we built that as an extruded solid. If we had built it as a surface, added the fillet, and then thickened it, it would automatically add that correct like offset. Yeah, and that's what we did on like the legs. So those fillets all kind of line up exactly the way we want. Other than that, the rule is just add the thickness of the material, or subtract it depending on whatever it is, and that should give you the right fillet. Good question. Okay. Cool, it's looking prongy. Okay. From the side, those prongs. Okay, let's see if I can walk this. Oh, wait, I have a screen. I forgot that we're recording the world's longest and most boring SolidWorks video. Okay, see how that prong is a little bit thinner than the surface it's attached to? Yeah, you can kind of see like that distance is not quite as thick as that distance. Yeah, okay, cool. We can change that. And this time I might do a sketch right on this plane. So I'm going to just say, yep, I'm going to sketch on there. I'm going to square up to it, so I'm looking at it. And I'm going to sketch what I think I would need to cut away. It doesn't matter. We're going to cut all the way through. Shouldn't matter. Let me get out of here. All right, so there are a lot of ways that we could sketch on here. I can pick the plane and then hit sketch up here. Now I'm in a sketch. Or I could pick the plane and use this little shortcut that pops up and say sketch. Or I could say sketch and then pick this plane to sketch on. I'm in the sketch now. All of those are fine, and they all do essentially the same thing. So however you want, go ahead and like make a sketch on one of these planes. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, so looking at the shape here, I'm just gonna, like everything else, sort of fake in the shape. out of here. I'm gonna like draw in the area that I want to cut away. And let's see, I'm gonna draw it on both sides here, come up, come over. There's sort of like a curve in between these two. There are a lot of ways that I can build a curve. This little 3-point arc is a handy one. It's under all these different symbols. It's under the symbol that means center point arc, but instead of center point arc, I'm going to use 3-point arc. What's cool about a 3-point arc is that I can say I want it to start here, I want it to end here, and then I want it to like touch something else. In this case, I'm going to like move it right up against this line where it shows me that little white tangent relation and say, yeah, make it tangent there. Oh, it didn't actually add the tangency. Because if I click and drag it, that's silly. Come on, SolidWorks. I can add that manually by, oops, 3-point, center point. I use 3-point. Once I have the arc, I can make it tangent there if I want. The arc that I was using is up here. It probably shows center point arc for you guys right now.
Yeah.
Under that drop-down menu, there's another one, hidden menu that says center point arc. For what? I'm gonna do it one more time here. I'll do it without like trying to make that relationship. So 3-point, you got it? Okay. Like I can go way too far out if I wanted, and then pick my arc, pick this edge, and then say make it tangent or make it tangent. It should be fine. I can move these things around independently. Okay, another handy tool is the distance, like these two lines should be the same, they should be equal. That's a relationship that I can say. There's this little equal sign. Now, if I dimension one of them, whatever that dimension is, let's say it's 2 millimeters, they'll both stay that same dimension. Is it 2? I'm going to see how good that was. It looks like it's 2. It's 2.5. Cool. All right. Again, I'm gonna like drag stuff around and see if it's constrained. I can make these 2 points vertical so that my arc is nice and even. And then I can measure like how deep that arc should be. Looks like it's about 3 millimeters. So let's try and dimension that. That point to there should be about 3 millimeters. Okay. All right, now a cut extrude needs a whole shape to actually cut things. And right now we just have this line, you know, with a couple bends in it. In order to make it a whole shape, I'm going to like build some like arbitrary box because that is what it's going to cut away. It's going to cut everything away. Yeah? Yep. All right, so let's say I added the 3 and it only worked on the top. I could add another 3 on the bottom. Or I could like click this point and this point. There's the two things that I want to be vertical, and one of the things I can tell them to be with a relation is vertical. And it will kind of snap them together. Okay. So I've got my sketch. I've got the areas I want to cut away. and I made like this extra box around the outside because when I go to features and I go to extruded cut, you'll see basically it's gonna like cut away everything inside that yellow box. And it doesn't matter to me that it's cutting stuff away outside. As long as it's cutting, you know, this stuff, I should be happy. How far do you want it to cut? Just make sure it's going all the way through both of your prongs. You could give it a dimension like I mentioned earlier. If it's some arbitrary dimension, I give it like a 0.99 just to remind myself that it doesn't matter. And I'm going to say okay and look at it, and cool, I have my prongs. Okay, so we have like 5 minutes left. You guys are almost done with this part of the French press. And if you ask me, this is probably the hardest part because we had like this crazy surface intersection thing. We've got like this circular pattern. We're combining surfaces and extrudes. The rest of this, I think, is going to be pretty straightforward. So I'm going to talk through, maybe into the camera, how I would build each of these features so you can go back to it. And I want you guys to try and work through this stuff for Thursday. These files are going to be due at the beginning of class on Thursday. You know that there are a couple people in your class who have already gone through this. So please, please, please. Yeah, full French press, the whole thing is going to be due like beginning of class on Thursday. Right, and I'll mention that too. And here, I'll show you guys on the big screen. It is. We're almost out of time here today. If I can find some time, I might be able to walk through some more of this stuff, like, and then post a video. I want you guys to try and get through it though. Like, it's one thing following my steps. It's another thing like trying to get through some of these features on your own. All right, so let me go through strategy of how I might break this up. So here's my French press. We have most of this thing built. You got to add this handle. This handle, if you look closely, is pretty flat. I would probably sketch this from this view here. I guess this would be like the side view. I would just sketch that handle and then extrude it so it's about that thick. I think that's a pretty straightforward feature right there. You might have to add some dimensions to make this curve look right, but I would just sketch it and then extrude it as a single part. This part down here, you could probably do something similar to how we did the prongs up top. You might sketch that profile like this shape right here. Like it's part of a curve, it jumps up and it cuts through our handle. And then I would, once you have that profile sketched, extrude it up about that far. And you can kind of see it cuts through the handle right there. It's fine with me if you have that just like intersecting. Just make sure they're not merged. I want to see, that this silver part is like a separate part from your black handle. So that's two features. Most of the complexity in those is going to be like how you get your sketch to look right. There is a screw. That's something, there are a lot of ways that you can do a screw. I might do that as just an extruded part going all the way through. Because this is an appearance model, I don't really care. Like, you don't need to put threads on the inside of this screw or anything. You could sketch a circle on your right plane and extrude it so it goes through about that far. You'll basically just make like a cylinder, and it will look like there's a screw kind of in place there. You could also sketch sort of like a little box on top of the circle. Man, I hope this is focusing. Not really. You can draw a little box on top of your cylinder and extrude a cut into the surface to get that little detail. That's like a tiny little thing. see if you can do it. If the screw is frustrating you, move on to the next big thing. So this is the other big part that you guys are going to have to build. And for the most part, you can tell this entire thing is revolved. You can get like 90% of the way done with this part just by sketching what you think the section view would look like and revolving it around an axis. Yes, there are a couple moving parts here, so you might do this like connected part right here as one revolve, and then do this like the filter handle thing as a separate revolve. That's fine. All right, you can kind of see, it doesn't focus on my face. I guess I could probably draw out what the section would look like, but it's probably going to look like this line cutting through. And you only need to draw half of it because you're going to revolve it around a center axis that kind of shares an axis with this thing here. The slats in the front, I would say that's bonus points. Slats in the front are bonus points. I know some of you guys will get to it. If you don't sweat it. I want you to try and get the overall shape of this thing first and get it so that it sort of fits right there. I do want you to try and build these parts in the same part file, just like we're doing, right? We're adding multiple bodies to a single part. When you're building this, it might be helpful for you to hide the glass part, to hide this metal outside handle and like support part, so that you can focus on the geometry for this thing right here. Yeah. That's fine. Eventually, yeah, when you have multiple parts like this, especially if you want to show like exploded views and things, it's helpful to put them in an assembly. Don't worry about that. Unless you're like at that point, I'm not asking you guys to think about an assembly yet. That's like a whole different animal. Okay, things you don't have to build. Notice that that's like a screen. Yeah, don't worry about building a screen with like thousands and thousands of little, yeah. But do build some sort of surface that would represent where that screen is in space. Just like a simple revolve is fine. The cuts in the bottom would be nice to see. That's probably a relatively straightforward sketch of like literally just that like circle with an X shape. You could draw that shape and then extrude it that thickness right there. The spiral right there, that spiral you definitely don't have to build. You can build it in SolidWorks. There's something called a helix that follows a path, and once you know how to set that up, it would actually look really cool. But I'm not having you guys like worry about that right now. That's the kind of like very project specific thing that like you would do it once and then you would know how to do that, and then a year from now when you had to do another helix, you would have to like refresh your memory because you would forget how to do that. Yeah, don't worry about that right now. And then like the circle pattern here, that's something else I'm going to say is bonus points because that's like a lot of extra detail. It's probably something that you could draw just 3 of these circles, and kind of like we use the circular pattern to pattern our legs as bodies around the outside of our French press, you can actually circular pattern your cuts, your like 3 circles here around this axis and get however many there are, like 20 of those sets of cuts. Bonus points if you can do it. If you can't, don't worry about it. You're not going to fail, but I am going to take points off. So your final grade for everything in this class on every project, half of it is completion. Did you turn in the assignment with like what I would deem as effort? You know, if you turn in exactly what we finished in class today and nothing else, I'm not going to give you like completion points because you didn't try anything else. But if you turn in a file and it looks like you tried, you're going to get completion, and that's half your grade. The other half of your grade is how accurately does your 3D model represent the thing you were trying to model. If, let's say, for example, you make it through this part, and you make it through, I don't know, maybe like the handle here, but this you couldn't get to resolve, and this you couldn't get to resolve, that's probably, what, like 3/4 of the way done with your representation. So you get, I forget what the points are. Let's say it's 10 points on accuracy, you'd probably get like 7 points on accuracy. Right? Not that bad. And the point in this class, and okay, so maybe like one step beyond like assigning points in this class. Like, yes, grades are important in college. No employer has ever once asked me for my grade point average. No employer has ever once asked me where I went to school. No employer has ever once asked me anything about my professors or like summa cum laude or what my minor was. None of that stuff matters. The only thing that matters, in my experience, when you're applying for a job is your portfolio, how you talk about your work, the reasons behind why you selected your work, and how you work with people, and how you speak about how you work with people. Those are the most important things. So in this class, if you show up and you show that you're putting in an effort, and I guarantee that if you are putting in effort by the end of this semester, you're going to know how to build a ton of stuff. And by the end of next semester, you're going to know how to build, or at least know how to teach yourself how to build almost anything that you want to build, and how to render it in KeyShot, and how to build things so that you can sketch on top of them. There's a lot. We're in just week 2, and most of you guys, at least half of you I know, have never touched any of this stuff before ever. Like, I'm throwing you into the deep end because I know that some of you are going to pick it up very fast. Just keep trying. We're going to get through this together, and I'm here to like help you guys. This is why we're doing this as a workshop, and that's why I've invited juniors and seniors back too, because it's helpful to have a refresher sometimes, especially if you've done a few projects where like you haven't really done a ton of SolidWorks. Cool, good, yeah. And I mean, thanks for sitting through this 2.5-hour walkthrough session. So yes, I'm not gonna like edit this because for bonus points, if someone wants to edit these. No, I'm not going to give up bonus points for that. Yeah. I am going to post this probably on YouTube under like just unlisted, and I'll post a link. The useful parts might be like, oh, what do I have to build and how might I build it? Please talk to your classmates. After I leave, after this class is over, your classmates, the engineers you eventually work with, your other industrial designers, the people ahead of you in class, the people behind you in class that are really good at SolidWorks, like get used to being okay with asking for help on this stuff, because SolidWorks is only going to get worse as it gets better, and you guys just got to get used to that. Okay, I'm done preaching. Happy Tuesday, and this is my sign-off message.